that is probably what they're thinking of when they're describing this on their website, communication and surveillance done without the satellite structure, but actually directly from the ionospheric bulge. Then there's many other things you might be able to do. Like I said, you might be able to create, anomalies in which you're able to release some of the greenhouse effects that are occurring on our planet, or you may be able to modify weather or do things that, military complex industry, look for in their development.
Absolutely. There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, I just have a feeling that it's a little more sinister than they present it to be.
Yes. In general, the whole concept of defense, which in general should be called offense in our planet, is sinister in general. I wish humans would get along a little better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got to get up to the enterprisemission.com website. I'm curious, when you have some time, Nassim, to read Richard Hoagland's analysis of the Norway spiral. He talks a little bit about HAARP in that, too.
Yes, it's very interesting. I'd love to study it more and see what he concluded to.
Tell me a little bit more about your theories of fractals in geometry and what that means to all of us.
Well, I early on in my evolution, I started to realize that maybe we couldn't just account for our reality, like all the atoms that makes up our body and everything else around us, just with the concept of little billiard balls we call atoms that are flying around, that there may be a deeper fractal reality that's occurring. And what I mean by that, there's not really a God particle. There's not really a smallest particle that makes up all our reality, that the smaller particle could be divided again and divided again and divided again, and that if we kept on building larger and larger accelerators, we'd get smaller and smaller and smaller particles, and that there was no end to it. And when I start to think that way, I realize, well, maybe our reality is made of little singularity, little black holes, because black holes have this infinite nature, this infinite mass, this infinite density at its center. And when I start to explore that and look at the atom with that lens, it started to become evident that this must be the case. I started writing scaling laws showing that, from universal size. I mean, most people don't know, but our universe obeys the condition of a black hole. If you take the mass of the universe and you put it in the radius that we believe our universe is, and you calculate if that mass-radius relationship obeys the condition of a black hole, it does, meaning light should not be able to escape. So the idea that we live inside a black hole and that everything inside it are smaller black holes in different scales that we're on the outside of. So we're seeing the radiative dynamic of the outside event horizon of a black hole start to come into my field, and I start to think that way, and I start to write physics that way and mathematics that way. And it all added up to correct predictions in many different ways, eventually bringing me to write this paper, the Schwarzschild proton, which just won an award in Europe, and that described the atom as this mini black hole with infinite density, the nuclei of an atom as a mini black hole. And that really has many implications in physics, but as well in philosophy.
I would love to get your take on why you think we're here and what we are.
Well, that's a large question, but if I were to attempt to answer that, I would say that, I think that, part of the Schwarzschild proton paper is I show that actually the space between things, the vacuum, is not empty, and that inside the proton, there's all the energy available for all protons in the universe. And so that everything is entangled through this web of information across space. The vacuum is actually what connects all things.
It's wireless. You just don't really see it, do you?
That's right. And you don't experience it because just like a good example, just like a wireless router, gives you internet, but you don't necessarily experience it directly. This vacuum energy is present everywhere, and it's a little bit of a reversal from the common thinking that the material world defines the space. Then I start to think maybe the space defines the material world. And when I start to think that way, I start to see that relationship between all things, and the math started to support it. It leads you to realize that maybe this great adventure we're on is actually a feed from the whole universe, and the multiverse and the megaverse, that we're on the very end of this fractal structure of space, looking back at ourselves, looking back at the universe, and learning about ourselves. That it's a whole network of information that we're part of, and that we're not actually isolated, but we're part of this amazing willworks of nature, and we're like little probes learning and exploring the universe from our own very specific perspective.
Could you say at this point, based on what you've been putting together all these years as a physicist, first and foremost, that there's got to be some design behind all of this, that it just didn't happen by a roll of the dice?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I don't believe in the roll of the dice, and certainly Einstein made very famous statements about this as well. But I think that it's a self-organizing system that it shows that the universe is actually learning about itself, and as it learns about itself, the information that it gathers coalesce and synergize to produce the next set of questions, which are now answered again, and then so on and so on, like in a feedback of information network. So the system self-organizes. You're really asking a question about God, and in this view, God is everything. Everything, interacting with everything is learning about itself and self-organizing, making very, very complex system in very short amount of times, which is a big problem in science. We can't really explain how the complexity of our biosphere occurred, and so well organized. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Even one human being is quite remarkable. If you take all the DNA in one human being and you wrap it around the world, you can wrap it 5 million times. That's all the information compactified inside yourself to make you actually work, and a very coordinated way for a long period of time. And so this level of organization, I believe, is the result of self-organizing feedback structure that's present in the space-time structure right around you right now in the vacuum.
And it's probably, if there are multiverses, and you think there are too, that it could be the same throughout?
Yes, it could be the same throughout in various scales, and actually my scaling laws, the papers I published showing scaling laws, seem to show that there's very specific, very complementary and similar dynamics that are occurring from universal size all the way down to subatomic particles, and that there's a fundamental physics that unifies all this, and that's been my great adventure.
Still to come, more with Nassim Haramein on Coast to Coast AM. We'll be right back.